My name is Alex, and for most of my life, I thought I knew how my story would end. I'd marry Rachel, the girl next door, my childhood best friend, the one everyone always said I was meant to be with. It wasn't just some romantic fantasy. Our parents were best friends before we were even born. Holidays, birthdays, school events, we did everything together. By the time we were teenagers, we were inseparable. Dating Rachel didn't even feel like a choice. It just happened. Like gravity. Everyone around us said we were the perfect couple. The kind of love that only exists in old love songs and faded photo albums. But what they didn't see was how much of our relationship was built on expectation, on pressure, on a future planned for us before we even had the chance to decide if it was what we really wanted. In our early 20s, life pulled us in different directions. I left our hometown to pursue a master's degree in a different city. Rachel stayed behind to study nursing. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional. We talked less, visited even less. And after a long, painful conversation one night, we agreed. No titles, no pressure, no long-distance strain. We'd stay friends. And we did. Strangely enough, we never truly disconnected. We both dated other people, but there was always this unspoken agreement that one day, when the time was right, we'd come back to each other. And that day did come. After finishing my degree, I landed a great job in the city I studied in. I was hoping for a transfer back home, closer to family, closer to Rachel. It took a while, but eventually I got it. I can still remember the excitement I felt when I packed my bags. It wasn't just about coming home. It was about rewriting the story we'd paused years earlier. Rachel, at the time, was in a serious relationship with a guy named Tim. I'd never met him, but I'd heard enough to know he wasn't a fan of me. Can't blame him, really. I was the childhood friend, the guy who shared her past, the one she never stopped talking to, even if just a few times a year. I kept my distance out of respect, but deep down, I think I always knew Tim wouldn't last. And I was right. A year after her breakup, Rachel and I reconnected. Naturally, slowly, and without pressure. It felt inevitable. We'd always had chemistry, but this time it was different. More mature, more honest. And for the first time in years, we weren't kids dancing around feelings. We were adults who had lived life, made mistakes, and still found our way back to each other. Still, I hesitated, because there was a part of me, one I never showed anyone, that had changed. My years abroad had opened a side of me I wasn't proud of. You see, after earning my degree, my boss Marcus, who became a close friend and mentor, offered me a 2-year placement overseas. It was a dream job in Tokyo, with travel to different Asian cities. The pay wasn't insane, but all expenses were covered, and the experience was priceless. I took it without hesitation, but the life I lived there was different. In Tokyo, and in the cities I traveled to, I found myself swept into a nightlife I never expected. Women approached me everywhere I went. Smart, beautiful, confident, and always clear about what they wanted. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't in a relationship. I was honest with everyone I met. No strings, no promises. Just company in a place that never felt quite like home. It became addictive. The attention, the freedom, the lack of emotional weight. I told myself it was just a phase. That when I came home, I'd leave it behind. That I could go back to who I was before I left. But people don't work like that. And when Rachel and I finally slept together again, after weeks of dating and dancing around that old spark, she noticed. She didn't say it in a bad way. In fact, she said it like it was a compliment. "You've changed," she whispered after, her head on my chest. "You were never like that before." She asked me how many people I'd been with while I was away. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell her the full truth either. I gave her a number that was safe, low enough to be believable, high enough to be honest. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't have known, is that the number itself didn't matter. It was the seed of doubt I planted in her mind that night that would grow into something I never saw coming. Still, everything seemed perfect. We were engaged within the year. Our families were ecstatic. The golden couple was finally making it official. Rachel moved in with me, and we started planning the wedding. June 2020. It was all happening. But behind the scenes, she was battling a fear I didn't see. A fear that I, the man who'd experienced so much, would never be satisfied with just her. And that fear would become the first crack in our storybook ending. What happened next changed everything. Things were moving fast. at least on the surface. Rachel and I were planning our wedding, and everything seemed to be lining up like fate had intended. We were living together, laughing more than ever, and our parents couldn't have been happier. My mom even joked that it took me long enough to come to my senses. Her eyes lit up every time she saw Rachel wear the engagement ring. But beneath that perfect surface, something was shifting. I noticed it in small, almost imperceptible moments. The way Rachel would sometimes go quiet after we made love, or how she'd ask seemingly harmless questions like, "Are you happy with me?" Or "Do you ever miss Tokyo?" At first, I chalked it up to wedding stress. Planning a ceremony during the uncertainty of late 2019 was no easy feat, but the more I brushed it off, the more frequent the questions became. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just after Christmas, a couple of months before our wedding date. We were at my place. Rachel was flipping through wedding invitations on the laptop while her cousin, Lindsay, sat nearby on the couch helping her pick color schemes. I was at the dining table working on some files for the office, absent-mindedly listening to them chat about florals and table linens. Then Rachel turned and asked if we could talk. Her voice was quieter than usual, careful, almost rehearsed. Lindsay stayed seated on the couch, which struck me as odd. I figured she'd excuse herself, but she didn't. She just crossed her arms and sat there, silent. I sat across from Rachel, already feeling a knot in my chest that I couldn't explain. "I need you to let me say everything before you respond," she began. "Those are never words you want to hear." She took a deep breath and said she had been thinking a lot about our differences, specifically, our experience. She said she couldn't ignore the fact that I had been with so many other women, that I had lived a life she couldn't relate to. She confessed that it made her feel insecure, small, boring. Then she dropped the bomb. She asked if I would consider opening our relationship, temporarily, so she could explore before we got married. I stared at her like she'd lost her mind. She rushed to add that she wasn't talking about anything emotional, just a few one-time flings. With strangers, people we didn't know. Nothing that could threaten what we had. "I love you, Alex," she said, her eyes already glistening. "I just need this to feel equal with you. I've only ever been with a few guys. I need to know what I'm giving up, or I'll always wonder." I couldn't breathe. I looked over at Lindsay, who still hadn't moved. "Did you put her up to this?" I asked sharply. "No," she said quickly. "I'm just here to support her." Support her? Was this some kind of intervention? Rachel continued, insisting this was about her own peace of mind, that she was terrified of being cheated on down the line because I'd feel unsatisfied, that she'd rather confront the fear now than let it fester in our future. She even offered me the same deal, said I could sleep with someone else, as long as the same rules applied. No one we knew, no repeats, no emotions. I felt my blood boil. "You want to open this relationship?" I snapped. "Fine. Then I want to sleep with Lindsay." It wasn't true. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to hurt her like she was hurting me. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Shocked, betrayed, confused. Lindsay went pale and immediately looked away. Rachel's face contorted in rage. "She's family," she hissed. "You know her. That's disgusting." "Oh, so strangers are fine," I spat back. "But someone who's always been in our lives is too far? What the hell kind of logic is that?" We shouted back and forth for what felt like hours, though I think it was only minutes. I told her if she went through with this, we were done. Period. There would be no wedding, no relationship, no coming back. She tried to calm me down, to explain again how much she loved me, how this was the only way she could feel whole and secure before starting our life together. But I was already gone. I stormed off to the guest room with nothing but a pillow and a head full of rage. I didn't sleep. I didn't think. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, asking myself one question over and over again. How the hell did we get here? The next morning, she left early for her night shift at the hospital. For the next 2 weeks, we barely crossed paths. She'd leave dinner for me in the fridge with sticky notes that said, "I love you," but I didn't respond. My texts were short, robotic. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't sure I'd ever be. The woman I loved more than anything had asked to sleep with other men, for closure. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already begun behind my back. The following 2 weeks passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Rachel and I were living in the same house, but barely speaking. Her night shifts at the hospital were a convenient excuse for distance. And though she left those little "I love you" notes with reheated dinners, They felt more like guilt offerings than affection. I was numb. Every corner of our home reminded me of what we were supposed to be. The wedding plans still hung on the fridge, save the date magnets, guest lists, color palettes, and I couldn't bear to look at them. I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, it was all a mistake. A moment of doubt. A misstep she would come to regret. But my gut told a different story. It was Thursday night when it all cracked open. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on work, when a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. Rachel had forgotten to log out of her email on the shared computer. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even thinking about her until I saw it. Reservation confirmed, the Evermore Hotel. A boutique hotel downtown. Expensive, discreet, and less than 2 blocks from my office. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she booked something for us as a surprise. Maybe she wanted to talk, or apologize, or try to make it right. But then I remembered. She was supposed to be working that night. My stomach twisted. I clicked into the reservation. It was for a single room. One night. Booked under her full name. My hands shook as I closed the window. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the house suddenly felt smaller, the silence heavier. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to vomit. But instead, I picked up my phone. I texted Marcus. "Are you free tonight?" He called back immediately. "What's going on?" "I think Rachel's cheating on me. Tonight. I need to know." Marcus didn't hesitate. He told me to come pick him up. We drove downtown in silence. I parked across the street from the Evermore, the neon sign glowing like a beacon of betrayal. We sat in Marcus's car for over an hour, watching. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. At 6:45 p.m., she arrived. Not in her nurse scrubs. Not with her hair pulled back like she always wore it for work. No, she was dressed in a tight black dress, heels, and makeup I hadn't seen in weeks. She walked through the glass doors without a second thought. I felt the air leave my lungs. Marcus looked at me, waiting for my cue. I didn't say anything. Just opened the car door and walked across the street like a man headed to his own execution. At the front desk, I asked to be connected to her room. The clerk dialed and handed me the phone. She answered. Cheerful. "Hello. Rachel," I said, my voice like ice. "I told you if you went through with this, we were done. This is it. The wedding is off. You just threw everything away." A beat of silence. Then panic. "Alex, wait, please." I hung up. I walked out before she could say another word. Back in the car, I stared straight ahead as Marcus pulled away from the curb. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, voicemails, but I didn't look. I couldn't. That night, I packed a duffel bag with whatever I could grab and crashed at Marcus's place. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor, staring at the wall, cycling through every memory I had of Rachel. The childhood summers. The first kiss. The moment I proposed. All of it poisoned now. In the morning, I made one phone call to my dad. I told him in the simplest terms what had happened. That I needed to leave town for a while. That I couldn't face anyone, especially her. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "I understand, son. Come home when you're ready." Before I shut my phone off completely, I sent Rachel one final email. "This is the last time you'll hear from me. The wedding is canceled. The house is yours. I'm leaving the city. Please don't contact me again." And then I disappeared. I boarded a flight to Bali the next day. No return ticket. No plan. Just an aching chest and a bottle in my hand. I didn't know if I was running away or trying to survive. All I knew was the woman I loved asked for permission to cheat. And when I said no, she did it anyway. Bali was supposed to be a place for healing, a temporary escape, a distant shore to clear my head. But the truth? I didn't go there to find peace. I went there to disappear. For a month, I existed in a haze of cheap rum, late nights, and isolation. The days melted into each other. I ignored every call, every message. Even my father's gentle check-ins came few and far between, and those were the only ones I responded to. I didn't even care if I still had a job. For all I knew, Marcus could have fired me, and I wouldn't have blamed him. I had become a ghost in my own life. I remember one particular night. It must have been 2 weeks in. I sat on the balcony of a rundown guest house, looking out at the waves, a cigarette burning in one hand, a half-empty bottle in the other. And I thought, how did I get here? 1 minute I'm planning a wedding. The next I'm 9,000 miles away, running from the only woman I ever really loved. And still, I couldn't stop seeing her face. That hotel room. That black dress. That voice on the phone as I ended it. It haunted me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something worse, hollow. The betrayal wasn't just about her sleeping with someone else. It was that she asked me first, like she needed me to validate her infidelity. And when I didn't, she did it anyway. Eventually, Marcus reached out. Said he could use my help with some loose ends back in Tokyo. I think he knew I needed something to hold on to. Anything other than drowning myself in booze and bitterness. I booked a flight, no hesitation. I landed in Japan on March 1st. The moment I stepped off the plane, something in me clicked back into place. The old rhythm. The clean air. The organized chaos. I felt alive again, if only a little. Marcus picked me up, and the first thing he said was, "You look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered. That's the goal. Work gave me just enough to keep my hands busy, but not enough to distract my mind. I avoided news from home. I didn't want updates. I didn't want to know if Rachel moved on or regretted everything. I especially didn't want to know if she didn't. Then the world shifted. Lockdowns swept across the globe. COVID wasn't just a headline anymore. It was real, and it was everywhere. Flights were being canceled, borders closing. Marcus asked if I wanted to go back to Canada before things got worse. I told him no. I needed more time. I convinced myself it would all blow over in a month or two. I ended up staying in Tokyo for over a year. During that time, I heard almost nothing about Rachel. I didn't ask. My house was being rented out, my accounts were fine, and my silence had become permanent. My family respected my wishes. They knew I needed space. Then came the call. September 21st. My father had a heart attack. It wasn't fatal, thank God, but he needed a triple bypass. The thought of him going under the knife without me there, it lit a fire in me. I knew I had to go back, but I also knew what that meant. Rachel. I hadn't seen her face in over a year. Hadn't heard her voice since that night in the hotel. But I knew going back would mean bumping into her. Our families were too connected, too intertwined. There was no avoiding it forever. Still, I packed my bags, said my goodbyes to Marcus, promised I'd check in. I landed back home 2 days later. Walked straight into the hospital room where my father was resting, pale but smiling. My mother cried when she saw me. I hadn't realized how much I missed them. How much I'd shut everyone out just to protect myself. We spent the next 24 hours talking about everything, except her. That part stayed buried, like a loaded gun neither of us wanted to touch. But I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Marcus met me for drinks the next night. He was already halfway through a bottle when I arrived. "So," he said, leaning in with a grin. "You gonna see her?" I looked down at my glass, the ice already melting. "I don't know," I said. "What's the point?" "Closure," he said, like it was obvious. "You don't get to move forward until you bury the past." He was right. I had come home to see my father. But maybe, just maybe, I was also here to close the last chapter of a love story that should have ended long ago. So I pulled out my phone, searched her name, and after a few hesitant moments, hit unblock. Her profile lit up. I stared at her picture for a long time. Then I typed, "Would you be willing to meet for dinner?" She responded 5 minutes later. "Yes." And just like that, the final confrontation began. The night we agreed to meet, I couldn't breathe. Rachel suggested a quiet restaurant a few blocks from her work. I chose not to overthink it. Maybe she wanted neutral ground. Maybe it was just convenient. Maybe it didn't mean anything at all. I got there early. Too early. Sat at a table by the window, watching the world move outside while mine stood still. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I wasn't nervous about what she would say. I was terrified of how I'd feel when I saw her. Then the door opened, and there she was. Rachel. She looked perfect. Beautiful even. Same eyes. Same walk. Same perfume I used to love. She smiled softly when our eyes met. I stood up, unsure if I was supposed to hug her or just sit. We settled on an awkward embrace that lasted 2 seconds too long. The smell of her perfume brought back everything. Good memories. Bad ones. Nights on the couch. Mornings in bed. The sound of her laughter in the kitchen while she made breakfast. And that voice, the same one I heard in that hotel room the night I ended it all. We made small talk for the first 10 minutes. Her job. My time in Tokyo. My father's surgery. She said she'd been checking in on him at the hospital. That didn't surprise me. Rachel always cared about my family, sometimes more than her own. But I was just waiting for the real conversation to start. I could feel it circling us like a shark in the water. And then, it struck. "I want to say I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "I'm sorry for what happened. For hurting you. for what I did to us. I took a deep breath. Are you sorry because I caught you? I asked, my eyes locked on hers. Or are you actually sorry for what you did? Her face fell. I'm sorry for both. But mostly, for breaking something that meant everything to me. I stayed quiet, letting the silence punish her. She explained how her insecurity had grown after learning more about my past. How the fear of not being enough had consumed her, even when everything felt perfect between us. She said it wasn't about desire, it was about control. About leveling the playing field. But why not just talk to me? I asked, voice calmer than I expected. Why go to a hotel and do what you did? If you loved me, why risk it? Her eyes welled up. Because I thought, if I just did it once, it would make the fear go away. That I'd stop feeling like I was living in your shadow. I shook my head slowly. You weren't in my shadow. You were my entire world. She covered her face with her hands, trying to keep herself from falling apart. I leaned back, forcing the flood of emotions to stay inside. The truth is, Rachel, I didn't need you to be perfect. I didn't need you to be experienced. I just needed you to be mine. The tension in the air was thick, electric. Every word I spoke felt like peeling away another layer of scar tissue. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart sank. The engagement ring. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. I've kept it, she said quietly. Not out of hope, but out of shame. I don't expect anything. I just thought you should have it back. I stared at it. That ring used to symbolize everything I believed in. Love, loyalty, forever. Now, it was just a piece of metal wrapped in a memory I'd rather forget. I don't want it, I said. That version of us, it's gone. Her lip quivered. She nodded and pulled the box back. Then I told her something I hadn't said out loud before. I think about the life we would have had. The baby we might be holding by now. The family dinners. The dumb arguments over groceries. I wanted that with you. I still dream about it sometimes. And when I wake up, it's like losing you all over again. Tears streamed down her face. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. I had run out of tears long ago. I know, she whispered. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We sat there in silence. No longer two people trying to fix what was broken. Just two ghosts revisiting the ruins. When the check came, we split it. There were no illusions left. Outside, under the glow of a flickering street lamp, she hugged me again. This one was longer, heavier. Like it carried everything we never said. Goodbye, Alex, she murmured. I held her a moment longer. Goodbye, Rachel. And just like that, she walked away. No drama. No begging. Just the quiet end of a story that was supposed to last forever. But some stories aren't meant to have happy endings. After that dinner with Rachel, I thought I'd feel closure. Like the wound would finally scab over. But what I felt instead was a strange silence. Not peace, just the absence of noise. Days passed in a blur. I visited my father at the hospital more often, trying to be the son he could lean on, but my mind wandered constantly. My phone sat silent most of the time. The only messages I got were from Marcus or my mom. Rachel didn't reach out again, and that, more than anything, confirmed we were truly done. But I couldn't stop thinking. Not about her, but about us. About how two people could love each other so deeply and still unravel like thread in a storm. I kept going back to her words, the way she said she thought she could detach and just do it once. What kind of love survives that? I returned to work that week, mostly to stay busy. The office felt different, smaller, older, like time had passed without me. People gave me that look, the kind reserved for someone who just returned from emotional war. I appreciated their silence more than their sympathy. Marcus and I had lunch a few times, talked about everything but Rachel. But he did ask me one question I hadn't thought about. You gonna try to stay in your stepson's life? The question landed like a punch. I hadn't let myself think about him. About the little boy I helped raise. His laughter echoing in the halls. His toy cars hidden under the couch. The way he'd jump into my arms after daycare and call me Dad, without hesitation. I didn't reply to Marcus. I just nodded slowly and finished my drink. Later that week, I tried. I messaged Rachel, asked if I could see him, just for a few hours. No strings. No drama. She said she'd think about it. That he missed me, but things were complicated. I knew what that meant. She didn't want me around anymore. Not because of the boy, but because of what I reminded her of, what we used to be. What she destroyed. Still, the next weekend, I picked him up. We went apple picking like we always used to. He held my hand, told me about school, and didn't even ask why I hadn't been around. He just accepted me, like no time had passed. And that broke me all over again, because I knew it couldn't last. I wasn't his biological father. I had no legal rights. And as much as I loved him, I couldn't be tethered to Rachel forever. She would always have the power to take him away. And eventually, she would. That night, after I dropped him off and drove back to my apartment, I sat alone on the floor, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question over and over again. Can I really live like this? Could I keep being a father to a child I had no claim to, knowing his mother might shut the door on me at any moment? The next day, I told Marcus I needed a break. He handed me a drink and told me I'd earned it. Then he hit me with another surprise. "You've been promoted," he said. "Effective immediately. Salary bump, new title, more freedom. You're free to go wherever you want next quarter." I was stunned. "Are you serious?" He smirked. "You've been through hell, and you're still standing. That's leadership." I didn't know how to respond, but a thought started creeping in. Maybe it was time to start over, completely. That evening, I sat on my balcony and drafted a plan. Not a revenge fantasy. Not some dramatic life reset. Just a clean break. I started looking at cities on the West Coast. Places with warmer air, fewer memories. I talked to a few old friends who'd moved, asked about job markets, housing. For the first time in over a year, I felt something resembling hope. But there was one loose end. Rachel's cousin, Lindsay, the one who sat there quietly while my life exploded. She reached out to me, said she wanted to meet, to talk. I agreed, curious what she had to say. We met at a small cafe, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like burnt wood but the booths are quiet. She told me she hadn't wanted to support Rachel's idea that night, but stayed to be a buffer. She was spiraling, Lindsay said. I thought if I stayed, maybe I could stop her from going too far. I nodded, not sure if I believed her. Then she leaned forward and said something I didn't expect. "She's seeing someone new. Has been for a while." The words didn't hurt. Not like I thought they would. "She's not happy," Lindsay added. "But she's trying to pretend she is. Same way she used to pretend nothing was wrong with you too." I thanked her and left. I didn't care who Rachel was with. What mattered was that I finally didn't feel anything at all. That's when I knew I was ready. The chapter was closed. The ghosts were finally fading. After my conversation with Lindsay, something shifted inside me. I had spent so long tangled in grief and betrayal that numbness had become my normal. But hearing that Rachel had already moved on, with someone else, felt like the final nail in a coffin I didn't even realize I was still carrying. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't angry. I just felt free. That same night, I sat down and started putting things in order. Apartment lease, ending. Utilities, transferred. I even packed the last remnants of the life Rachel and I had built. A few framed photos, some notes I'd kept, and the ring box I found weeks ago buried in the back of a drawer. I didn't look inside. I just dropped it into the trash and kept moving. But the real decision, the hardest one, was still waiting. My stepson. I had taken him apple picking last weekend, and for a few blissful hours, it felt like none of this had ever happened. Like we were still a family. But every smile, every laugh, was a knife in my chest. Because I knew the truth, I wasn't his father. And one day soon, Rachel would slam that door shut. I couldn't be part of his life if it meant keeping mine tethered to her. And he didn't deserve to grow up confused, watching a man fade in and out of his world like a ghost. That night, I wrote him a letter. I kept it simple. I told him how proud I was of him, how much joy he brought me, and that none of this was his fault. I ended it by telling him I'd always be rooting for him, no matter where life took me. I sealed it, left it with a toy truck he loved, and dropped both at his grandparents' house. Then I got in my car and drove. I didn't have a destination yet, just the need to be somewhere else. A few hours later, I ended up at the coast, watching the waves crash violently against jagged rocks. It was beautiful, chaotic, honest. I stayed there until sunrise. The next week, I submitted my official resignation. Marcus tried to talk me out of it, but he didn't push hard. Deep down, I think he knew I wasn't just running. I was reclaiming what was left of myself. Then came a surprise I didn't expect, a message from Rachel. She asked to see me, one last time. At first, I almost ignored it. What more could be said? But something in her tone felt different. So I agreed. We met at a park we used to visit during the early days, back when things were still innocent. She looked tired. Older. Not physically, but emotionally. Life had caught up to her. "I heard you're leaving," she said, sitting beside me on the weathered bench. I am. There was a pause. I know I don't deserve to ask anything of you, but I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly. For everything. For being there. For him. For loving me when I didn't even love myself properly. I didn't respond. I've made mistakes, she continued. More than you know. But the worst one was not realizing what I had until it was gone. I think, I said quietly, you knew exactly what you had. You just didn't think you'd lose it. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I don't expect forgiveness. I already forgave you, I said. A long time ago. That's the only way I could move forward. We sat in silence for a while, watching leaves fall from the trees like slow, graceful confessions. I hope he remembers you, she whispered. He loved you so much. I hope he remembers that he was loved, I replied. That's all that matters. When it was time to go, she reached into her bag and handed me something wrapped in cloth. It was a photo of the three of us, her, me, and the boy, taken at a fair this summer before everything fell apart. We were laughing. Real, unfiltered joy. I barely recognized myself. I found this when I was packing, she said. Didn't feel right throwing it away. I took it, nodded, and stood. Goodbye, Rachel. She stood too. Goodbye, Alex. No hugs. No tears. Just two people letting go of a future that never came. Later that night, I booked a one-way ticket to the West Coast. I had a job offer waiting, a small apartment lined up, and no ghosts following me, for once. It was the clean slate I had begged the universe for. But the real gift? For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to turn the page. The next chapter was mine to write. The morning I left for the West Coast, the sky was the same soft gray as the day Rachel and I moved in together years ago. Back then, it had felt like the start of something eternal. Today, it marked the end of something I had finally laid to rest. My car was packed with just the essentials, clothes, a few books, the photo of me, her, and the boy tucked into a folder I still wasn't ready to look at. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving that morning, not even Marcus. I'd sent him a message the night before. Thank you for everything. I owe you more than you know. He replied with just 2 words, live free. That was the plan. The road stretched ahead like a clean canvas. I didn't play music. I didn't need it. The rhythm of the tires on asphalt and the hum of my thoughts were enough. For the first time in months, I wasn't running from anything. I was driving towards something new. My new job was waiting in a smaller city, one with ocean views and quiet neighborhoods. It wasn't flashy, but it was peaceful. My apartment was modest, but had a balcony where I could sit in the evenings and just breathe. The kind of place where healing didn't feel like work, it just happened. But even with the distance, something stayed with me. Sometimes, I'd wake up expecting to hear small footsteps down the hall. Other nights, I'd roll over and half expect to see Rachel sleeping next to me. Grief has a strange way of haunting the quiet. But I let those moments come. I didn't push them away. I let them pass like waves, just like the ocean I now lived near. I stayed in contact with Marcus. He'd send me pictures of his ridiculous escapades, drinking too much, laughing with strangers, dating women half his age. That man would be young until the day he dropped. He told me the office missed me, that the old man still asked about me, and that I could come back anytime. But I didn't want to go back. One day, I received a letter. It was from Rachel's father. He thanked me for everything I had done for their family, for his grandson, for Rachel during the years we were together. He said he didn't know all the details, but he had seen the change in her after I left. She lost more than a fiancé, he wrote. She lost her anchor. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say. Maybe some things are better left unsaid. Months passed. Seasons changed. I started going to the gym again, made a few friends at work, even went on a couple of dates. Nothing serious. But it reminded me that I was still capable of connection, that I wasn't broken, just bruised. Then, one afternoon, I got a message from Lindsay. She told me Rachel had moved out of town. She didn't say where, and I didn't ask. But she also mentioned something else. Rachel's son, my stepson, had started asking about me again. She says he still remembers, Lindsay wrote. He keeps asking when he can go apple picking again. That message undid me. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried for the first time in months, not out of sadness, but because somewhere, somehow, a little boy still carried a piece of me with him. That's when I wrote him a second letter. I told him I was doing well, that I missed him, and that he should keep being brave and kind. I didn't know if Rachel would ever let him see it. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I said what I needed to say. One night, standing on my balcony, I looked at the stars and realized something simple but profound. Pain doesn't vanish. It transforms. It turns into wisdom. It carves room for something stronger. I may never get back the years I gave to Rachel. I may never be part of that boy's life again. But I wouldn't trade the love I gave, for them, for us, for anything. It wasn't wasted. It just ended. And endings, painful as they are, make room for beginnings. I don't know what the next chapter of my life holds. But I do know this. I'm finally free. Free of guilt. Free of the weight. Free to love again, whenever the time is right. On my own terms. In my own way. And if life ever leads me back to something that feels like family again, I'll be ready. Because this time, I know who I am. And I'll never lose myself for love again. Looking back on everything, I've come to realize that sometimes the deepest pain teaches the most lasting lessons. Love, no matter how pure or long-standing, can't survive without trust, honesty, and mutual respect. And when betrayal enters, whether through deception, selfishness, or fear, it leaves a scar that time alone cannot heal. What I've learned, especially as I've grown older, is that we must protect our peace just as fiercely as we protect our loved ones. We cannot pour ourselves endlessly into people who see our loyalty as weakness. For those of us who've lived through years, perhaps even decades, of marriage, sacrifice, and rebuilding, it's crucial to remember that we still deserve fulfillment, not just duty. Letting go isn't failure, it's wisdom. Holding on to our self-worth, even after heartbreak, is not only possible, it's necessary. So my advice, to anyone in the twilight of life wondering if starting over is worth it, yes, it is. It's never too late to demand respect, to heal old wounds, and to choose joy over regret. We don't owe our happiness to anyone who takes it for granted. And as long as there's breath in our lungs, we still have time to begin again, with or without someone by our side.